see. And I always mispronounce this. McNaughton? Is that how you say that?
It's presented a couple of different ways. There's some that replace the C with an apostrophe, so McNaughton or McNaughton.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from the fact that the person in question was a Highland Scot, and this was the Victorian era, so spelling was sort of optional at times.
Okay. I see. Would insanity be considered an illness in some ways?
It's sort of a catch-all because there are many ways for you to be considered non-compos mentis. Some of them are developmental. So, for example, we would say that someone with a severe manifestation of Down syndrome, whose brain never properly developed, it's not really insanity, but they are non-compos mentis. They don't have a composed adult mind. Others are mental illnesses that are completely internal, such as something like the go-to is schizophrenia, even though schizophrenics don't necessarily commit crimes in any real high, can be organically or outside imposed situations. So one that used to be a much bigger problem than it is today was syphilis. So tertiary syphilis, after it causes the venereal aspects, starts to attack your brain tissue. And once you get to tertiary and even later stages of syphilis, your brain is not operating properly, and you might be considered non-compos mentis. So there's lots of ways to. So it's not one illness or even one group of illnesses, but that's we typically say that insanity and non-compos mentis are the same thing, and they're not quite. But for the purposes of this class, you can consider them to be functionally interchangeable.
I see.
There are even some people that would argue that most of us are non-compos mentis until we get our first cup of coffee in the morning. I don't know that they're correct.
I might have to agree with that, actually.
Could I ask a question about the post-test?
Sure.
Okay, hold on. So, for question 12, it asks, if all of the following insect stages are found in the body, like which one should be the estimate for the most accurate time since death? I was just wondering, like, that was one of the ones I got wrong, so I was wondering, well, like, that's not for a grade, right? So I can ask the question.
No. You are free to ask questions about it. The reason I do this post-test is twofold. One is it helps me figure out where I need to improve lectures, and two, it's to show you how much you've actually learned. We also use it for program assessment, but that's neither here nor there. So with insects, if you collect ones that showed up on the body really recently, your age estimate is going to be way too short. Like, I think this was somebody turned this in on the independent investigation. They had a completely skeletonized animal that had some beetles on there, and they're like, well, this has just been dead for a couple of days. I'm like, well, that's technically correct, but the fact that you have empty fly pupa that have completed their life cycle, it's been longer than just a couple of days. So with insects, we want to grab the oldest. They hatched as larvae, they went through their pupal stage, and they're still there. That takes a while, and so that's going to give you a more accurate picture of what shows up on the body. So it's the oldest stage of the bugs. Does that make sense?
I have like kind of a question spawning off of that. So
yeah,
I was running down like a highway the other day. And so I remember running by it earlier, and there was like a deer carcass on the side of the road, and it was only in like the normal orifices. But whenever I ran by it yesterday, there were bugs on like its side and like just everywhere.
Yep.
So does it like spread?
Yes, because they're eating the body, right? So they start with the easy parts to access. So they want to eat the insides, the hair and skin. Not very tasty. It'd be like, a pork rind versus a steak. They're both edible, but you know which one you really want. So in order to get to that, they have to go through the soft parts of the body. So it's going to be the mucous membranes of the nose, the mouth, the eyes, because they're basically just balls of jelly, or going through the anogenital areas. And that's where they start. And then they chew their way into the rest of the body. However, what's on the inside of the rest of the body is a limitation, lack of access to oxygen. So they will also, once they're inside, they will chew their way out in form of air holes. So we see the insects, as they're consuming the internal tissue, we'll see them more and more visible on the outside of the body. So what you saw when you ran by this decomposing deer, the first time, it was in, early active or maybe bloat. The next time, it was really well into the active decomposition stage. So good observation on your part.
Okay.
They typically start at the head and eat their way down. Unless there's like a stab wound or a big access to the gut shots. They're like, yes, we love this, because what they love even more than your muscles are your fatty internal tissues. So like kidneys and liver and things of that nature. They're like, it's soft and delicious. We love it. That's where they go first.
All right, can I ask one more question?
You can ask as many questions as you want.
All right, so for this one, it says, this tool is good for diagnosing the likely chemical structure of a fiber, drug, or explosive residue without destroying it. And I got that one well, too.
All right, so things that are going to do... Well, that is actually something that might come up on the final exam. So structural chemistry of anything that's going to just determine structure... It's gonna be your... Does anybody want to help him on
Is
this
that the
particular tool?
SEM?
No. SEM is just a really powerful microscope.
Oh.
We're talking about a chemical structure.
Chemical structure.
So we have several tools for identifying chemical stuff, right? We can start with the simple one, the spectrophotometer. Does that give us structure?
I don't believe so. Photometer. I don't think that would give structure, would it?
So it can tell us things of some groups, but it won't give us the true structure. What about chromatography? Will that give us structure?
I think that's the one I put, and it was wrong.
So chromatography is good for identifying things. It absolutely is, either if you're using the gas or the liquid form. But chromatography takes our material, passes it through something that's going to separate it into samples, I should say, that separates it into its component parts. And then how long after it emerges from where we started from, either in terms of time, how long does it take to get from point A to point B, is distinctive for that material. So our chromatography is good for identification. It's not good for structure. The tool that's good for structure is our mass spectrometer. Little bit. Our MS. I cannot speak. It's Matt. But without destroying it. I missed the without destroying it part, in which case our best sample is spectrophotometer. I missed that. I was pulling up the post-test. Will we get absolute structure with that way? No, but in order to use the MS, we do have to. It is destructive. So I apologize for just confusing the bejesus out of you, Ben. So in this case, in the answer on the post-test, because it says without destroying it, which is the part I wasn't paying attention to, it's the light spectrometry. You can do infrared, you can do Raman. It's not shine a light at something and measure how much bounces off. If you really want good structure, like the actual chemical structure, you want to go for your mass spectrometer. Why can I never pronounce that word?
So for chromatography, would that be if you're trying to compare a paint chip left at a crime scene to an actual vehicle?
Probably not, because paint chips don't dissolve real well. It has to have you can do pyrolysis chromatography. That's going to give you your binders, and for that you would do chromatography to compare one sample to another. But the problem with looking at the binders is that they will be class level evidence. They'll tell you the likely manufacturer of your paint, but less so about the specific paint color or paint chip. I make it sound like chromatography is a second-class citizen when it comes to identification, and it's really, Really not, because its strength, if you don't need to know the exact chemical structure, you just need to know, okay, is this THC? Is this polyester? Is this 100% cotton? And you have reference samples for those THC, 100% cotton, polyester. The chromatograph will do that identification. Does it emerge from the instrument at the same time as my reference sample? And it also gives us quantification. And so as a result, more stuff is run on GC and in Crime Lab than just about anything else. You do often have a GCMS, something that's attached to a mass spec, but the liquid and gas chromatographs are really important tools because they can quantify and identify in the same step. I don't want to speak out loud.
Can you go over like how mass spec is like destroys the evidence or whatever?
All right, so you have your little atomic sample, right? And we need to know what is its structure. Does it have rings? Is it a double bond between carbon and nitrogen, like you'd find in explosives? How are the atoms in this molecule put together? And the way we do it is by taking a whole bunch of purified molecules, which we get from this is why they're almost always attached to a chromatograph, because the chromatograph purifies it till we have just one particular type of molecule, and then we take a crap load of those molecules and break them up into little pieces with ionizing radiation. So this takes our often complicated molecules and breaks them into a ton of little pieces. We then measure on the downside or on the backside of the instrument the mass and the frequency of each of those little pieces. So, this is a sort of thought example. You order a pizza, and you have a pizza in the box, and you want to know what kind of pizza it is, because you can't see it. We can't just put atoms under a microscope yet and figure out what they are. But you know what is on most kinds of pizza. You know that they have one big chunk of dough that's really heavy. And you know that if you have a red pizza, it's got red sauce, and you have 300 grams of red sauce. But if you got a white pizza, it's got 500 grams of white sauce. If you have a mushroom pizza, you have a crap load of little tiny mushroom pieces. If you have a pepperoni, you have maybe 40 or 50 medium-sized pepperoni pieces. If you have a meatball pizza, 15, 16 big honker meatballs. So with the mass spec, I'm going to drop them. And what we're going to come back with is we have 1,000 jillion examples of little bitty tiny pieces. We have some big honkers, 600 gram pieces that would be consistent with our dough. And then we have a bunch of 500 gram pieces. So you're like, okay, I know that my 500 gram piece, that's consistent with my sauce, my white sauce. If it was 300, we know it was a red sauce. The fact that I have just an absolute whack load of little tiny pieces tells me that this has mushrooms on it. The fact that I don't have the meatball-sized pieces, I don't have the pepperoni-sized pizzas, tell me that the only thing my mystery pizza could be is a mushroom and white sauce pizza. I realize that's sort of a bizarre thought experiment, but that's really what we're doing, is because we can't see the individual structures, but we know from simple molecules, how big should a phenyl group be? What is the mass of that chunk of molecule? That's a common one to be busted off during an ionization process. So if we find something that has the right mass for a phenyl group, we know that our molecule, whatever the hell its actual construction is, it's got a phenyl group in there somewhere. And you can say the same thing for a ketone or an aldehyde, or other things from organic chemistry that you may or may not have encountered, or may or may not just be totally terrified. But it's the idea is if we have a whole bunch of the constituent pieces, and we know what those pieces do, we can reconstruct what the original molecule looked like. Because we know how big it was. Because we get some that we know what the maximum size is. We know what some of our constituent pieces are. We put them back together until we have something that when you count up and measure up all the pieces, you get the original molecule back out. That was a very long-winded explanation. I don't know if there are some really good videos from the Royal Chemistry Society on what it's doing, but hopefully that's helpful. And it's okay if you say, I'm still super confused. It's all right.
So I always get confused on like the distinction between a contusion, laceration, and abrasion. Like I always get them mixed up. Can you elaborate on the differences between that, please?
All right. So contusion, a bruise. You have thumped something really hard, but you haven't broken the skin because it's a closed wound. So what's happening is that the blood vessels are getting squished against the harder surface, like your bones inside, or simply by the force of whatever smacked them, cause them to pop open and release their fluid into the surrounding tissue. If you've ever dropped an apple on the floor, you say it gets all soft and squishy in that one spot. That is a contusion just in fruit form. It's releasing all those juices. Broken skin necessarily, but it's got a soft spot. Right? This is an envelope from Amazon here, a couple layers. So laceration is if I pull on it and I tore it apart. So I put tension on it and it was not able to deal with that. And so the edges here are all, like we could put them back together, but we have a totally irregular torn up edge on this. If on the other hand, I used an incision, so I used something sharp to slice through my skin here, we have a nice, neat, straight overlap. So this would be an incision. Or we can do it with a knife. So if I take actually, I could slice through. Actually, I'm giving myself a good laceration as opposed to. Let me get a better knife. Let's do that sharp knife in here. Take a knife that's reasonably sharp, slice through, and give a nice slice to give our incision here. So, incision, slicey, sharp object that is going to cut through the skin. The big one that people often get mistaken on, and I actually gave you an example on one of the lecture quiz, is where you get your skin caught on something, and it gives you a linear damage, but it's not actually an incision. So here I have, I may have showed you this before, this is just a clay shaping tool. It's got a big-ass needle on this side. If I were to catch my skin on this, I'm not actually going to cut myself, trust me. If I were to catch my skin on this and pull, it'll give me a nice linear shaped opening in the skin, but you'll often see where it's just snagged and ripped. Like if you've ever been clawed by a cat or you've gotten into something sharp that's just dragged across your skin, that would be actually a laceration because it's not slicing through the skin, it's just mechanically ripping through it. If your object is really small, you don't get like super jaggedy flaps of skin, but it's not, nice and regular.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Because the nice thing about reviews from here is that as opposed to in the classroom, I have all kinds of stuff that I can use for terrible impromptu demos.
I think you used an Amazon package way back when, like the beginning of the semester too, to show the difference. Because I happen to remember that, so I'm pretty sure.
A lot of Amazon packages. I'm terrible. I know I shouldn't. Jeff Bezos is terrible, and their treatment of union workers is bad. I can only boycott so many things before I'm naked and hungry. And trust me, you don't want to see either situation.
Well, kind of like a weird question. Like, what is the rarity of Faraday cages? Like, do a lot of like for that one discussion question, do like a lot of Interpol like agencies and stations have them?
Border Patrol certainly has them because a lot of electronic devices are seized crossing the border because they have cops have them in their part of their evidence or seizure kit more and more these days because people are having, like, if you stop someone, they got drugs on them, you also seize their phone because they may be dealing and selling. So they're super cheap because really all that makes a Faraday cage is mesh. Like, we hear the word cage and we think it has to be cage shaped, but it's really not. It's just a sheet of wire mesh that interferes with electromagnetic waves. So they try and pass through the openings in the mesh, and they don't do it well. It doesn't matter what shape it is. So they're super common. Like, a reusable one costs about $15, and that's with all the ports and stuff in it. So.
Yeah, a microwave is a Faraday cage, right?
I believe it has Faraday cage components to keep the microwaves inside the microwave as opposed to going so that when you're watching your Pizza Pockets, it doesn't microwave your face.
Because if you put your phone in the microwave, it actually won't ring, or like it's like airplane mode almost.
I believe that the effectiveness of a Faraday cage is related to the wavelength of the EM band that it uses. So if your phone is close enough to microwave in terms of wavelength, yeah, that would work. But for example, there are also Faraday cages that are used anywhere that in many industrial situations where they're doing welding or stuff of that nature, where the Faraday cage is actually really big because that's the right wave. Excuse me, right wavelength for what they're working on.
Let's see. Interesting. Quick question from this model here quickly. Premeditation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now that I say it, it makes sense. In my mind, I was thinking meditation, like yoga, but... So that's just planning something ahead of time, right?
Yes. Because if you just plan, if you think about how you're going to conduct an act, there's no question that you was intentional and you were knowingly doing it, as opposed to a off-the-cuff, response to a situation.
I see, that makes sense. So for this one, this is actually a really good question. So it says, what are becoming more important or more common in forensic analysis? I'm going to say probably not trial and error, hopefully. But let's see.
That was a chapter 21 question. I will say that of the 3 pages in chapter 21.
Right.
So if you remember all the way back to the beginning of the semester, as I said, this particular chapter 21 ties back to what we talked about at the very beginning about things like contrite fallibility and ethical conduct of forensic science. It is not ethical in the vast majority of cases to say there is 100% chance, I am hundo-p certain, that the material we found at the crime scene came from person X's pants. We can say the soil there is restricted to the 50 miles around Morgantown in West Virginia. It was found at both the crime scene and on our defendant's pants, indicating a strong likelihood that he was in the region. In the case of DNA, where you can actually quantify the likelihood that a particular combination of loci appeared, you'd say something along the lines of the odds of a random person having this particular set of loci is 1 in 4.8 quadrillion. Our defendant has this exact set of loci. So one of them is allowing and being explicit about the limitations of your knowledge, and the other is not. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing.
Could I ask like a general question? Like, what is vertopsy? Is it like virtual?
Virtual autopsy.
Interesting.
Virtual autopsy. This is actually one of the few situations where the tech is not entirely unlike TD. In this case, usually a MRI scan is made of the entire body, which is then processed through computer learning to stack each set of doing the MRI through the entire body. That's the expensive part, because that's a lot of computing power and time on a diagnostic machine. The person conducting the autopsy then doesn't cut into the body itself, but they look for diagnostic criteria of illness, of trauma, of what have you, using the tools, or using the MRI tools. There have been a number of, in the past year, actually really large number of vertopsies conducted on COVID deaths. So this allowed people to look at the changes that COVID caused in the lungs, in the heart, in other parts of the body, without exposing themselves early in the pandemic. Obviously, we were like, how long does this last? How easy is it to transfer from one person to another? And so the experts around the world who are trying to get a handle on what's the best way of treating this problem could all look at an autopsy at once and together. So the vertopsy tool is actually, it's expensive, but it can be really, really powerful. People who are not fans of the vertopsy say that it's not, even with the diagnostic equipment like the MRI, it's still not nearly as good as getting in there and like, this is this person's kidney. That doesn't look right, because MRIs don't capture things like color changes. They can't measure mass, although you can estimate mass.
Oh my goodness. I am struggling for words here, but I'm trying to think autopsy or biopsy after, I guess autopsy. That would be, who does that? Medical examiner?
So biopsies are microscopical analysis of little tissue samples. Pathologists do those.
And
I will say that scatopsy is actually a word, and it's for dissection and analysis of poop.
Oh.
They do it with wildlife.
I see.
What has your wolf been eating? What has your owl been eating?
That is quite the job. Oh man. Just I'm trying to think of color change. That was something that, because I know rigor mortis. Is it liver mortis with a color change of your skin, or alga mortis?
Yes. Alga is temperature, liver is change, rigor is stiffness.
Can you explain like how the liver sets, like what like if there's pressure on an area, is that the part that's light or
Right. Well, lighter colored. So if you take any part of your skin, you have all of your living tissue is threaded through with tons of little capillaries, right? Because all that living tissue needs oxygen, needs fuel, needs to get rid of wastes. However, these are really tiny little tubes, and they're made of cells. So if you press on them, you will temporarily close those tubes. That's why if you press on your skin and then you remove your hand, you can see temporarily a lightening of the skin. Now, blood pressure causes the blood to rush back into those areas, but all it takes is pressure. So if you have an area of your body that is held down by your own body weight, because your blood is your heart's no longer pumping the blood, it's no longer trying to force blood into those tissues, blood will not be able to passively move into those areas. So if I were, you can't see my desktop here, but if I were to die like this, the underside of my arm and the top side of this one would be under pressure. So blood is a liquid, right? When the heart is no longer forcing it to circulate, it's going to, and you do still have parts of you have more volume in your blood vessels than there is blood to fill them. This is part of why we have high and low pressure. So the liquid blood is going to, under the influence of gravity, slowly settle into the blood vessels it can access. The ones that are squeezed off, it can't get into. So those are going to remain light. So in this case, my example here, the underside of my arm would be under pressure. Blood would settle sort of on the sides here because that would be the lowest area it could get to. Over time, that blood will clot. It's no longer settling. It's going to form into like a fun jelly-like substance. Yummy. And it will thicken as you are dead. So if your liver is set, the blood has clotted, it's not going anywhere, and pushing on the discolored area won't change it. If your liver is still relatively recent and it's not completely clotted and jelly-like, applying some pressure to it will temporarily squeeze that blood out of the localized blood vessels. But when you take the pressure away, gravity will still pull them back into it. You'd be like, if you ever had that toy that was a tube filled with like a loop tube filled with things, and you could squeeze the bottom half of it, and it would push the little toys in it into the top side. Once you release the pressure, they all flow back down to the bottom. Same idea. Or an otter pop.
Interesting. That's algorithm. And a quick question before I forget. The quizzes. The lowest reading quiz is going to be dropped, right?
No.
Ooh.
No. I take that back. Yes, the lowest reading quiz is dropped. Yes. So if you missed one, you're okay. Let me check and make sure. I am a little off the top of my head. Yes, so there are 16 total reading quizzes, 15 modules plus the one at the very beginning of the semester that was the reading of the syllabus. So the lowest one of those will be dropped.
And if the lowest one is the syllabus quiz, that one can be dropped too?
Yep.
Sweet.
They are all treated the same. There's a row in your grade book that's I don't want to make sure it's actually shown to you and not just to me. That says module quiz total. That has automatically dropped your lowest grade. However, it treats, until you finish all of them, it treats all the ones you haven't done as zeros, so it's dropping those. Once you finish, so let's do today. So once you finish today's the module quiz that's due today, module quiz 15, you will know exactly what that component of your grade will be. Actually, if you're assiduous, you will be able to figure out, although let's see, the TAs still haven't finished grading module 14 or 15. You will be able to figure out exactly what you need to earn on the final to get your desired grade as soon as you get your lecture quizzes in. So you'll see, at that point, you'll see your current score. It's the big total you see. If you add the lower, you add your bonus points up to 80 to your current score, and subtract that number from whatever you want to, whatever the corresponding points for the grade you want. So, for example, if you want an A, subtract your current score and your bonus points from 855. That will tell you how many points you need to earn on the final exam in order to get an A. If you want to get a B, subtract your current score and your bonus points from 760. If you want to C, subtract them from 665. If you like subtraction, you can do subtraction.
All the investigation bonuses been graded.
Yes. I graded those last night, or the last of those last night.
And Doug, actually, I am muted. And quick question about the lecture quizzes. If it happens to be over, like, more than 100%, is that just good, or does that just go to bonus points?
Lecture quizzes over 100%. Is that even possible?
Yeah, because I think there were 2 lecture quizzes that had extra points on them.
Nope, they just count as that's just gravy. That's part of lecture quiz. If it's not counted separately, specifically as a bonus, muzzle tov.
I can work with that. Good.
Although I think the extra credits were on the assignments, not the lecture quizzes. There were, I think, 3 possible bonus points in firearms and 1 in fibers, or I think that's where those free extra stuff comes in.
No, I think there were a couple. There was 1 or 2 extra credit points for the lecture quizzes because mine's like slightly above the. Like mine's at a 240 and I have like a 240.1 right now.
Oh, look at you! Oh, if it's a point, if it's a fraction of a point, it might just be rounding error. Again, lucky you.
And one quick question about diatoms. I know something to do with water, but I kind of blanked on what they actually are.
Diatoms are little single cellular microorganisms. The population, so the fraction of each type and the number of types, let me back that up. The types that are present and what proportion of the overall population they make up is fairly distinct to different watersheds or lakes or rivers or oceans. So this would be like if you wanted to figure out what country you were looking for based on what its people were like. One person isn't going to tell you anything. Like, okay, you're like, all right, I want to know where this person comes from, and I can tell you that they are a Caucasian male. Doesn't really narrow it down. But if you say, okay, we've got 1 Caucasian male and 9 black males and 1 Asian male, that the number of countries that have that sort of population breakdown, much smaller group. So 1 diatom doesn't really tell you squat. Unless, for example, we have 1 member of what used to be called the Pygmy tribe and the exact name of the tribe is escaping me. But they're only found in one place on Earth. If you have one member of that, okay, you can be pretty sure what you're dealing with. But most of the time, you need a sample of the various population of diatoms to tell you whether you're looking at, okay, this is the Cheat River watershed. This is the Monongahela watershed. This is Tigert Reservoir. This is the Allegheny. This is the Atlantic Ocean. This is the Mississippi River north of St. Louis. So it can tell you where something that has been in the water came from or has been. So, for example, if you were looking at a drowning victim and you looked at the diatoms in the lungs, they would tell you where that person went into the water.
Would you normally find diatoms in like water, like your bathtub, if you drown there?
No, not really, but that's because water that goes into the residential water supply has been filtered so that we don't have super huge populations of microorganisms in our water. There can be a few of them that can get in, broken pipes or old feet or old supplies, but most domestic tap water doesn't have them. American tap water, in general, there are places where it's not, is quite safe for you from at least from a microorganism perspective, because we chlorinate the shit out of it. But there have been cases of people who don't clean their contacts properly. They use tap water for their contacts instead of sterile solution, and they get like crazy amoebas and stuff in their eyes. So don't do that.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm at the very end here, so just my last few questions. For modus operandi, that's the same thing as an MO?
Yes, that's what it stands for. And that's just the way you conduct a crime.
I don't... I completely missed that. Okay, MO is...
Every crime has an MO.
I got it. I don't know how I missed that. That's obvious.
That's part of why we have review sessions like this, so that you can find these things out without penalty of any kind.
Good. I think those are good. And then pattern evidence. What would that be?
Pattern evidence is any time you are trying to determine if two things have the same pattern. So it's like fingerprints. We're comparing fingerprint pattern to fingerprint pattern. Tool mark evidence, firearms evidence, treadwear evidence. Not so much blood stain, because in that case we're not comparing specific repeatable patterns to each other. Hair and fiber can have some of this pattern evidence problem. Bite mark evidence is pattern evidence, and we already know that that's bullshit. Trying to think of what the other big... I feel like I'm missing some. Tread, tire, fingerprint, firearms. I think those are the major ones. Anything that where the logged visible matter doesn't apply, that's pattern evidence.
That's all I have. I should ask about. Alright, I get one more question here. So the descriptors often used to identify subjects include which of the following? I want to say... Sorry, let me ask the question better. So I want to say color clothing would be good if you're like trying to find a suspect. Let's say that like just left a crime scene, but on the other hand, I don't.
So we're talking here about profiling, right?
Mhm.
So we're looking for descriptors are consistent characteristics. Does that help you?
Yeah.
With that? So something that you really can't easily change about yourself.
Unless you're Michael
you
Jackson.
some things you can't change at all, realistically. Some things you can with a lot of surgery. Some things you can with a lot of money. But like your fingerprints, you can't really change those except by giving yourself a whole bunch of scars. But other things are really easy to change, like you can dye your hair or things of that nature.
Okay. That's all I have. All right, that's all the questions I have. Just a quick question about the exam. Do you know, like, more or less when the grades come back for that?
They should be pretty quick because there are no essay questions. So, but I do have people who have class conflicts that won't take their exam until Thursday. So Thursday would be the earliest you should get your grades. And I anticipate that I won't have any delays on. It's literally just a question of releasing them to you.
I see.
So the pain, the pain will be known right away.
Okay.
I say pain.
It's
of course,
pain.
I don't think it's that hard because I wrote the exam, so it's kind of it's that whole cognitive bias thing. But study, prepare your review sheet well. The only hazard that I have with giving people the ability to have a review sheet is that they don't study the rest of they put the wrong things on the review sheet and they haven't looked at anything else, and then they are totally boned.
Ooh. That's a scary
I feel like
thought.
I don't mean to stoke anyone's anxiety there.
Not at all, not at all. I'm just
No.
low-key freaking out.
Low-key freakouts should not be. We don't want high-key freakouts. We don't want freakouts in general because that is not productive to learning or demonstration of learning. So that's not good.
But it feels good, so.
Sometimes.
Oh, and
Yes, that review sheet. If you looked at your, you are allowed to have a one side of an 8.5 by 11 page paper to refer to on the exam. That was given in the review packet I sent out. Oh, good Lord! I actually sent it out last week. Maybe I need to resend it because people lose their email. It's my gift. It's pandemic time, and as a class, y'all are struggling a little bit more than previous classes. So in the interest of keeping things fair and equitable, muscle love.
quick question. It is allowed to be printed, right?
Yeah.
So let's just
God, I can't read my hand. I can't read my handwriting at 6-point font.
theoretically.
If you print out the entirety of your notes in 6-point font, notice I did not say you could use a magnifying glass, and you could read them. Congratulations, you gamed the system. You've put in a ton of work copying your notes onto this little page, and now you have to find the information you need in 6-point font on an 8.5 page paper when you have about 1 minute per question.
Ooh, wow. That might overcomplicate it. I like it, though. Theoretically speaking, if I were to get the review packet that you sent out and shrink it onto this type of paper, would that be allowed?
Yeah.
I don't know if it would help, but I'm just curious.
You could do that. You could absolutely do that. Since the review packet is all questions. It's not answers. Because I'm evil! I'm not sure why that got like little duck hands there.
Oh man. You must enjoy this, Dr. Moore. You've got to.
If I didn't, I'd hopefully have a different job. No, I do. I like teaching. I love my students. I like my colleagues. I can't say that I love West Virginia because I'm a city girl at heart. But the job I couldn't ask for something that I think I enjoyed more.
That's
because it
good.
allows me to do a lot of what I enjoy doing. And I don't, with the exception of grading essays, which nobody likes. Like,
No.
there is no person on earth who likes it. But every job has to clean the monkey cages. There's a downside to every job. And if essay grading is cleaning the monkey cages, I can't really complain.
That is true. I worked at Chick-fil-A for 2 years, and when managers didn't like me, I would get to clean the women's bathroom. So that was a job. I had both bathrooms usually, so that was the monkey cage, I guess you can call it in this example. Random question: you're from Texas, right?
Yes, I am.
And city. So what city are you from?
I would predominantly call myself a Houstonian, but I also spent a fair amount of time in College Station and in Dallas growing up.
Sweet. Yeah, I have a family right near Arkansas, but we used to go to Dallas like every year. So I love the Galleria Mall is my favorite. I don't know. All right, I think I can stop torturing you. I think this is the last opportunity I have to torture you, Dr. Moore, for these review sessions. So
You're not going to be able to make the Sunday one?
I will make the Sunday one, but I think I will, hopefully, but I'm sure I will send you an email before then, but I just want to say thank you so much for hosting these again. This is awesome.
You're quite welcome. Thank you, all of you who are here today, for putting in the extra effort. I see your names. I know who you are. And while I will never reward an individual student, if someone I know has been working hard, is right on the cusp, it is not entirely unheard of to shift the entire class. Just a little bit. Now, you don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to depend on my goodwill, since that is entirely an optional thing, but it has been known to happen. As I said, I won't do it for one person because that's favoritism and that's not cool, but if moving the entire class up helps everybody, well, that's not too big. That's not too big a deal. Also, as I said, as I was telling my other class, my seniors, I am up for promotion this year, so if I give everybody A's, I look like a really good teacher. As opposed to giving everyone a mix of grades, which makes me look like a really bad teacher. Such as that. All right, I actually do need to go. It's 2 o'clock. I have something I have to do, but I will hopefully see many of you on Sunday. And if not, you are, of course, free to shoot an email. I do have office hours tomorrow. If that's something you want, you'll need to book them. I will not be holding office hours next week, but I will be available for individual appointments if necessary. But y'all have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Moore.
you.
Bye.